This is the fiery redhead here from the podcast Wide Open Spaces with Elise. Well, I have a fire in my belly as well as some fiery red hair on top of my head. And I hope that the fire that I have inside of me goes through this microphone and reaches out to you far and wide. I hope I ignite that spark, that flame in you to put yourself first, to empower yourself, to gain insight into yourself, to become a stronger individual with yourself, and then radiate that into the world. This is episode number 145, Rebranding, the intellectual insight into you. You can check me out at wideopenspaceswithelise.com. Elise is spelled I-L-I-S-E. Go to Spotify, go to Apple, go anywhere you love listening to your favorite podcast. Hit that love button and follow me. And now let's listen and evolve together. Put your earbuds in and let's take a ride. Today's a kind of funny day. It's February 29th, 2024. It's Leap Day. I don't know what that really means. I know what it means. Just a weird kind of thing, a weird concept that we have. So leap into your day with some fire in your belly. Get that spark going and make today a productive day for yourself. So the title is Rebranding, the intellectual insight into you. Sounds great, right? To have intellectual insight into yourself. So let's talk about what's a brand. You all know what a brand is. Look at a Coca-Cola can. The red can with the white lettering that says Coke on it with that little wave-like insignia. You know from a distance when you see it on a movie screen, on a TV, sitting on top of a desk. That's a Coke can. That's its branding. Branding tells you a lot about a product just by looking at it. You'll see different companies have logos. I have a logo for my podcast. Logos with minimal words, no sound, just something you look at, tells something about your product. My product being a podcast and a blog. Now, there's many things that go into branding a product, a business, an item. And I'm not going to get into those specifics because we're going to utilize that when we talk about rebranding. And so we know what a brand is, okay? You watch those Super Bowl commercials and you see the brand. My favorite was the Dunkin' Donuts commercial for this year's Super Bowl. All you have to see is Dunkin' in those orange kind of letters, and right away you know what that entails. That's their branding. And so when you rebrand, why would somebody want to rebrand? Well, there's different reasons for rebranding. Wanting to refresh, make it new. Maybe it's time, things become a little retro and you want to modernize. I remember years and years ago, and it's kind of come full circle. There's a lot of rebranding based on the name of a company or groups because they may be showing some type of racist tendency. A word that was in our vocabulary for many years and now has created a different inappropriate meaning. I shouldn't say different, but it's brought more to the forefront. So a great example I remember is the Dixie Chicks. Well, they're no longer called the Dixie Chicks. They're called the Chicks because the word Dixie is referring back to the time of old Dixieland and slavery, and even Disney World has changed their Splash Mountain because that was the theme of it. And so the world changes, and with that changing and new knowledge or just becoming more knowledgeable about something that's happened in history can create something to rebrand itself. And that rebranding becomes a necessity, because if you don't rebrand, well, then you're not really reaching out to the public. You're excluding people and you're having a sound to your company that you really aren't intending. And it's at no fault to many, like the Dixie Chicks, they grew up in Dixieland, and that's what it was called. But as time moved on, not so appropriate. Have you ever been in the market and you go in the market to get your favorite can of whatever it is? For me, it would be sparkling water, the flavored sparkling waters. And you're standing there like in a Target and you're looking at the shelf and your eyes are going back and forth and back and forth. You don't see your product. You do it a couple more times, maybe I missed it, and you don't see your product. And as you begin to turn to walk away, something catches your eye at the corner of your eye, and it's the word of that product. And you turn around and you go and you pick it up and you realize they've changed the box, the can, the colors, the insignia. They've rebranded their product. And at first, you were looking for that old tried and true, what you were used to seeing. But for some reason, whatever the philosophy was of that company, they needed to rebrand. And so when we rebrand, it's kind of like new. It almost would feel like as you're bringing that box home and opening up that can, something new is going to come into your mouth. But it's not. It's your same old favorite sparkling water or whatever it is, drink, just the packaging is different. It's refreshed. It's new. And there's something beautiful in that, even though it can get a little annoying because they've rebranded and, well, they made it a little uncomfortable for you and irritating to figure out where your product was. It makes it new and refreshed. And you see that in Starbucks all the time, right? For the holidays, their cups change because now it's the holiday season. So let's bring a little bit of different color and life to the cups, separate from our normal logo. So the ultimate goal of rebranding is how your product is perceived. And some of the benefits of rebranding are sustaining relevance. You want to keep your product relevant. You see other products evolving and changing, and you must stay competitive. And so continuing to be relevant. Maybe it's to reach out to a new audience or customer. Rebranding is a big aspect of that. There might be products that they notice maybe reach out to a little bit of an older crowd and they want to get a younger crowd interested in their product. So by rebranding it, you may bring in a whole other different age range of customers for yourself. It can increase the value of your company and your product by rebranding. And it can be transformative and it shows your clients that you're evolving. Yes, that a product can evolve like a person can evolve. Are you seeing where I'm going with this? So let's talk about, we know what rebranding is. It's changing the packaging and everything about your product. So now I want you to think about yourself. Yes, yourself. How does the world see you? What is your brand? What do you project to others? The good, the bad, the ugly, the positive, the healthy, the negative. What does your brand, project to others? Does it show that you're evolving or does it show that you're stuck? Yeah, I'm going to make you think a little bit. Think about what your brand is. Who are you? I started this off by saying this is the fiery redhead here because I have fiery red hair. It's part of my brand. It's part of who I am. It's not just about the color that's on the top of my head, but everything that goes with being a redhead in society, genetically, not being able to lay out in the sun like a lot of you. Not that any of us should, but we get burned very easily. We have freckles. That's all part of my brand, the fiery redhead. So what is your brand? I want you to think about it for a minute. And I'm going to give you some steps on how to rebrand yourself. And what is the point of rebranding yourself? Maybe you're happy with the way you are. Well, I'm going through the process of rebranding my podcast and my blog. Why? It's been almost 4 years in May with the same logo, the same opening music. What you heard today was a brand new way of opening the podcast, but I opened the podcast the same way. And so I'm trying out some different things until I do my official launch and making a big deal out of an official launch because, again, that rebranding hopefully gets me to a new audience to listen to me, because what I talk about from being a teenager to later in life, people can relate to. But when I look at my analytics and demographics, I seem to hit the same age groups. So I want to expand my reach. And part of that is through my rebranding. It's a refresh. If you don't like the word rebranding, refresh yourself. How are you going to refresh yourself? Maybe your relationships aren't what you want them to be. Maybe your job isn't what you want them to be. Maybe you're not going in the right direction. How can you refresh yourself? So we're going to look at ourselves today as a brand and what we want our brand to present to the world. My podcast, the main theme, my tagline, listen and evolve with me. It's all about evolving and me giving you different ideas through my own personal experiences and through what I know others have lived through and what I have witnessed on evolving. Evolving is such a powerful word in my world. And I want it to become a powerful word in your world also. Tongue twister, I have to tell you. That was hard to do. And I want you to constantly have the word evolving kind of rattling up there in your brain, because that thought process is going to help you rebrand yourself, help you to move forward and through it to become the person that you really want to be, or to change a different direction. Maybe you're feeling like things have just been kind of status quo and you're ready for a change, just like the products. They feel like their product, status quo, they're making money, but how can they make it better and bigger and reach out to a larger audience? And we want to do that in our own worlds. We want to be bigger and better and be able to have whoever our audience is, whether it's 1 people or 20 people, our audience, how they perceive us, why they want to interact with us. So let's talk about how are you going to rebrand yourself? Well, it's going to take a little work. So if you can, jot these things down. If not, listen now, go back and jot them down. You can also go to my blog at wideopenspaceswithelise.com. And in the blog, these are listed. The blog definitely always correlates to the podcast because not everybody likes listening to podcasts and not everybody likes reading a blog. So you can get the information in either or if you just don't have time to listen to a podcast, you can go read a blog a lot quicker. Not as much information, but the general idea. So you're going to start with rebranding yourself by creating a logo. Yep. You're going to make your own logo. I did mine last night. It was fun. I injured my hip. I don't know how, and I've kind of been stuck in the house for a week and feeling kind of down. And so when I was working on this podcast, I'm like, I'm going to create my own logo that represents who I am. And I had a lot of fun in it, and it revolved around the fiery redhead. And if you've heard of their podcast, my red hair plays a big part in who I am today. And so I created this logo. What is your logo going to look like? You've got colors to pick. You've got words to choose. You've got icons to decipher through. What is the picture on your logo? How do you want it to represent who you are? Remember earlier I talked about a logo. When you look at a logo, it says something. Through the written word, through the pictures, through the colors. It says something about your brand. So, what do you want your brand to say about you as you move forward? How will it represent the changes you want to make in your life? So, when you're sitting down creating this logo, have the thought in your head, what do you want it to say about you? Now, you can go online and create free logos. There's all different kinds of websites. There's Zazzle, there's GoDaddy, where you can create your own logos. And then if you want to use that logo, you pay a small fee, and then you obviously can create things with that logo. And I think it's wonderful because you're making yourself into a brand, who you are. Not a brand to make money. Your brand is about self-improvement and empowerment and gaining more insight into yourself and what you project to yourself and to others. So when you create this logo, I want you to really keep that in mind of how you want, first and foremost, how you want to be seen by others. Not what they want from you, but what you want to project. And that's what your logo should do. So when you have some free time in this process, you're going to start out with the logo. And why the logo? I think it will give you great direction in creating the refreshing of yourself. It kind of gives you a great starting place. So go to one of those websites, you'll find other ones as well, and create your logo. And that's where you start. My favorite part of rebranding is picking a theme song. You heard some music in the beginning of my podcast. Well, I have someone who has produced and has a brand new opener for me, and I'm really excited about it. And when I launch my rebrand, it will be in there. It's my theme song to Wide Open Spaces with Elise. But the theme song, which has no words, but the way the music plays, it evolves. And that's what this podcast focuses on, the evolution of you and me, myself. And so I want you to start to think about a theme song. Maybe sit down and just pop in your earbuds and put on a playlist, not your favorite songs, but maybe put in acoustic music or pop music and just sit and listen. When you really listen to the lyrics, you're going to find a song, or you may have a song that you really feel like it represents who you are. So when I was trying to decide how to tell this composer, excuse me, how I wanted my theme song to be, I had to go back to my roots, the roots of this podcast. And during COVID, sitting in my backyard every day, I would listen to music. Sometimes it would be those playlists I'm talking about. Sometimes it would be a favorite artist. So I went back to the song that started it all for me, that gave me the idea for the podcast, the title for the podcast. And I sat outside yesterday and I listened to that song about 3 times. And I sang it out loud because I wanted to remember the feeling. Why did this song motivate me to finally download some apps, get a microphone, and start a podcast? And so I needed to go back to these roots of how it all started so that I could rebrand and identify the parts of the podcast that I wanted to keep, that were my consistent things, my strong things, and the things that I felt were out of date, or I'm at a different point because I've evolved and this podcast has evolved, my listeners have evolved. And if I have new listeners, well, they want to evolve. And so how do I incorporate the roots of what started this podcast, which was a song, and create a rebranding? So I want you to sit, take some time, and pick a song for yourself. That can be your theme song. Now, if you are a musician, you write lyrics, you play instruments, maybe you can even make your own theme song. Most of us are not talented that way, so you either have someone do it for you like me, or you pick a song that's out there. I talk about theme songs a lot and how music really adds to our lives. So now, step 1, you have a logo. Step 2, you have a theme song. Your logo tells what your company is about, and your theme song now adds some more color to the refresh of you, who you are, and what those words and those lyrics say. And what would it represent if you were to say to someone, here's my theme song. This is me. So be wise when choosing what your theme song is. Now, most companies, all companies should, they may not, but they have a mission statement. Not just companies. Sororities have mission statements. Different organizations have mission statements. The mission statement states what your company is about. It tells you what your purpose is, what the goals are, what the values are, what your outcomes are, how you're going to be memorable, and what you want to accomplish. And so in a very short statement, you want all these things to be all-encompassing. You want people to know, who are you? What's your purpose? What's your goals and values in life? And what is your outcome? What is your outcome of wanting to refresh yourself? And how do you want to make an impact by being memorable? And ultimately, by doing this refresh, what do you want to accomplish in the immediate forefront? Because you can't tell at this point by refreshing yourself where that's going to take you and what journeys or roads that's going to lead you down. But you know initially what this refresh, what those goals are that you want from it. So I want you to create your own personal mission statement. And it's not that easy to do. I mean, it's a statement that incorporates all the things I just said, and it's your vision. And if you can feel you can sit down and 1, 2, 3 write a mission statement, go for it. But I know that when I've been in organizations or when I was developing a whole recreational therapy department in a hospital, I needed a mission statement for my department. And so to make it all encompassing, you must sit down and take some time to identify what is your mission in refreshing yourself and rebranding yourself. So logo, your theme song, your mission statement. Step number 4, once you've completed your mission statement, is to gain some insight into your brand, which would mean gaining some insight into yourself. What direction do you want to take your life? That's not an easy question to ask yourself. But podcasts about evolving, well, then you should know that evolving doesn't come easy. It takes work. This is the area where you've really got to dig deep. Gain some insightful knowledge about yourself and your personal needs. If you're taking this refresh, rebranding step, it's because you're craving change in your life. That's how I was with the podcast. I wanted to feel fresh and craving change because the podcast has evolved and I've evolved and it's become something a little bit different. So my old branding really doesn't represent what this podcast is. And by you making this change to refresh, you're identifying that you want to have a change in your persona. You want to have people see you in a different way. And one way is by having a tagline. So one tagline that I use a lot in my podcast is go and sit with yourself. Did your skin crawl a little bit? Most of us don't want to go sit with ourselves. But it's really important to do that to gain insight. And in this refresh process of yourself, you really do have to sit with yourself. You can't just whip it out. You could, but would your rebranding or your refreshing really be what you want it to be in the end? So in this process, when sitting with yourself, I want you to write the pros and cons of why you need or feel or want to rebrand yourself. Why do you want to refresh yourself? And this is where you delve into what the title means, the intellectual insight into yourself. Who are you? Don't tell me you're not intellectual. We all are. Our innermost thoughts, positive, negative thoughts, are at an intellectual level because we're thinking and we're questioning. And that's why pros and cons are a great way to look at why you want to refresh yourself. What are some of the benefits and what are some of the negatives? Because yes, sometimes when we refresh and rebrand, we have to let go of some things. So the main question I want you to do is ask yourself, who are you? So create that tagline. Mine is go and sit with yourself. What is your tagline? This tagline that you create to go with your new refresh will be something that you will repeat to yourself on a daily basis. Maybe when you're struggling, maybe when you see progress happening. You repeat your tagline to yourself. And you know what a tagline is. I mean, if you watch a TV show like The Housewives, if you're a reality fan, and sorry, I'm a reality TV addict. But at the beginning of each housewife show, each housewife pops up, she has a little tagline. And it kind of says or gives you an idea of what this season's going to be about. So what is your season going to be about? What is your refresh going to be about? What is your tagline? The next thing I want you to do is kind of something you did back in school, and maybe your skin's going to cringe a little bit when I say it, is to create an outline. To gain that intellectual insight into yourself, you've got to create an outline. You know, when we put words to paper, the neurons, the endorphins, the dopamine, everything gets ignited in the brain because we're taking what we're thinking. We're telling our hand to move onto paper, to take the words from inside out onto this paper, to memorialize it, for you to look back at it. And so creating an outline of how to refresh yourself, it's kind of your guidelines when you're starting to feel like you're not working on yourself the way you wanted to. That refresh is kind of lagging behind a little bit, or things are stopping you. When you have this outline, it gives you steps. Sometimes you might have to go back all the way to step 1 if you find that you've lost your footing. But you have this outline to remind you and to give you guidelines of how you want to proceed in the future. And if you feel like giving up in this refresh, the outline is there to show you what your original purpose was of rebranding yourself, what that intellectual thought process was. Yes, every one of you out there is intellectual. I don't want you to hear that word and say to yourself, I'm not intellectual. Because anybody who's interested in self-growth and evolving is intellectual. I end every podcast with positive thoughts, create positive energy. That's what I say to myself when I'm struggling, when I'm frustrated. And it's incorporated into my podcast. Because my podcast, well, I'm here to help you, and I give you my learning lessons and the stories that I've gone through. And so my positive thoughts of things that I've learned or learned from clients, I give back to you, which is the positive energy. So now in the refresh process, you've come a long way. You've gone through all those steps. And now it's time to put that refresh into motion. Don't start your logo and then go, I'm going to refresh. I want you to go through all these steps in creating your rebrand, because this is your foundation for you to move forward in your life. with these new aspects and these new values and these new goals and this new direction that you want to take. So once you've completed all these tasks, you're ready to launch yourself. You're going to launch you like a company launches their new rebranding campaign. I want you, when you start to hear people make comments about you that you know have come about because of your refresh, I want you to write them down, because we forget these things. They may be positive, they may be negative. Why are they negative? Let's look at that intellectually. Is it because the person that's saying these negative things to you is not growing themselves? Maybe is a little bit jealous or envious that you are refreshing yourself and moving in a direction. So when you hear these comments about these changes they've noticed in you, whether they're good or bad, write them down and look at them. And maybe you're not projecting the way you intended. And so you might need to tweak your rebranding a little bit. I mean, you see that in companies all the time. They try something new and it doesn't work so well. And so they have to tweak it. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It really means that you've gained insight that something isn't working and you need to go in a little bit of a different direction. I want you to stand back for a minute and look at yourself from a distance. Think about your current brand and how you represent yourself to the world. Now look in a mirror to see how you want to change your personal brand and how accomplished you want to be seen by others. You know, looking in a mirror and seeing your reflection looking back at you can be very enlightening. The rebranding of yourself is about change, growth, evolution, and empowering yourself in life. Time isn't standing still, and so we must move with it. So now it's time for you to get to work. Yep, I'm challenging you. I'm putting this challenge at your feet. I've given you the guidelines on how to refresh and rebrand yourself. I mean, the world is yours, and you can live in it any way you choose. Empowering yourself this way will create a new energy in your belly and in your heart. You'll feel motivated, and you will be able to look into the future of you. Looking into the future of you. All those things that go on with inside your brain. That intellectual thought process. What is the future of you, and how are you going to choose to refresh yourself? Now, you can go from this podcast and not do one thing I said, and that's your choice, and that's okay. Or I hope that I've sparked that fire inside your belly to want to refresh, to rebrand. Now, rebranding a podcast once every 4 years is great. Maybe you need to rebrand and refresh yourself more on a frequent basis because your life is changing daily. New people come into it, and new things come into it, and new challenges happen. So that's okay if you've got to retweak the branding process, the refresh, when things kind of put a monkey wrench in it and change the direction, the trajectory of where you're going in your life. That was a tongue twister. Again, 2 tongue twisters in one podcast. Maybe it's that leap day thing. I don't know. But keep in mind that if your refresh isn't quite working because things have changed, tweak it. It's okay. That's growth. That's evolution. That's why you're here today, to listen and evolve with me. Thank you for joining this fiery redhead from Wide Open Spaces with Elise for episode number 145, Rebranding the Intellectual Insight to You. Because now you're intellectual and you're ready to refresh. Remember, positive thoughts always create positive energy. Go out and explore all those wide open spaces in your world. And until next time, my friends, ciao.